Um, Travis, I'll stop sharing my video till I'm on, right? Or do you want me on?
Either works. All right, looks like we don't have anybody else coming yet, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. We'll start with some housekeeping first, and then we'll kind of get into the meat and bones here. So for starters, if you look in the chat, you will see all of our names and email addresses. So if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to us after the fact. During the webinar, looks like everybody is muted, so just stay muted throughout the webinar. Would be helpful. And then for video, you're already off, and that's perfectly okay. How the flow is going to work, we're going to have our three presenters here today, and they're going to kind of go over their presentation, things they have to say. If there's any questions for any of the presenters, please put it in the chat. We will address that question after each presenter goes. So if you have any questions for anybody, please put it in the chat, and we will answer that. So with all that being said, we're really excited to have our three presenters today, and we're going to start off with Kirk Hovenkotter, who's the Executive Director for the Greater Redmond Transportation Management Association. Kirk's going to share for about 5 or 10 minutes on feedback he's received from the business community and some survey results as well. So with that being said, Kirk, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, hi everyone. Here, I'm going to share my slides real fast. All right. All right, thanks for that introduction, Travis, and excited to be here with you all. As Travis said, I'm Kirk Hovenkotter. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Redmond Transportation Management Association. And I know a few of you in the room today, but for those of you who may be from Bellevue, the Greater Redmond Transportation Management Association is the advocate for better biking, walking, and transit in Redmond. Our 30+ member organizations represent over 100,000 people who come to Redmond every single day for work and school. And that makes us a powerful voice for more transit service, affordable transit passes, sidewalks, crosswalks, and bike lanes and bike trails that make it easy to reach Redmond from across the region, and also makes Redmond a more accessible and inclusive place. Our 30+ members run the gamut, from small businesses to nonprofits to Fortune 1 companies. And all of these organizations are members of the GRTMA to advocate for better transit service and streets and trails that can make it easy to reach their work sites. And we're in a moment, though, where COVID-19 has flipped all of that on its head. And I want to use this moment really to frame this conversation about teleworking from what we're hearing from our member organizations. And we just put out a survey to all of our member organizations to understand what their plans are, what their thinking is. And when you combine that with the numbers that we're seeing around transit, traffic, and bike usage around Redmond, it tells just a fascinating story about how Redmond, and likely a lot of the East Side, is approaching this moment differently than other parts of the region. And just so it leads us to the state of the commute in July 2020 during COVID-19. And after we surveyed our members, the response that we heard back is that still nearly 2/3 of Redmond employees are teleworking, compared to only 5% before. This is just a staggering shift in how people are moving or coming to Redmond. And this means a lot because 69% of Redmond's employees don't live in Redmond. So many of them all of those employees commute in every single day. And that leads to some of the differences we're seeing on the commutes to Redmond versus other parts of the East Side. On 520, the main state highway that leads to Redmond, we're seeing traffic down still by 50% compared to 2019. When you look at how traffic is responding on I-5 or say I-405, those traffic on those corridors are only down by 20%. This likely means that our employees are going to be teleworking for longer, or more of our employees are going to be teleworking than comparable regions and cities in the Puget Sound. Also, transit ridership is down 65% across King County, but in Redmond, we've seen some of the largest declines in transit ridership on our peak commuter routes. While we still have a third of our workforce who is coming into work every single day, we've seen that those workers who have moved to teleworking has led to many of our peak buses being a lot less crowded. And King County Metro is looking to kind of right-size their transit network in the coming months to address those realities. And we've also seen that employees in Redmond have responded with a biking boom. Biking is up 340% on the Sammamish River Trail compared to previous years. And this is just a huge shift. And so we're seeing that our employees are getting around in different ways. But what this means for teleworking is that we've heard our employees, or from our member organizations, that only 45% of them have a back to work plan or a long-term teleworking plan. And while so many of these employers had to suddenly change how their employees worked and made really rapid decisions, they're now having to reflect and say, how do we do this for the long term? How do we do this month over month? And how do we make sure that our greatest resource, our employees, don't burn out and that they're able to do this for the long term, as it looks like they're going to have to. And so this is a great conversation, and I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with folks on the line, as well as Elham and Tim, about how their members, or how their organizations, and what are their recommendations for mid to small businesses who are looking to create these long-term teleworking programs and why it's essential to them. So I will pass it off to our next presenter.
All right, thanks, Kirk. That was very informative, and I love the survey data that you're able to share with us. So next up, we have Elham Shirazi, and she has over 30 years of experience in teleworking. She's also the lead consultant for WorkSmart. And so we're going to take it from there, and I know I have your slides. I'll go ahead and share your screen here, Elham, and I'll let her explain what WorkSmart's all about.
Thank you, Travis and Kirk, and I'm very excited to be here with you all today. Actually, I wanted to start by letting you know, and I'll talk a little bit about WorkSmart, but WorkSmart is a service that is offered through King County Metro, and although it says I'm the lead consultant, our services are free. And so I don't want you to think there's going to be, you know, a dollar sign next to what I'm presenting about. We are here to help employers in King County implement and improve and expand teleworking and flexible work hours programs. I actually have been with this program since 2009 when we started. And I took a little break in 2018, but I'm back here now, and very happy to be working with all of you and Kirk and Travis in implementing teleworking. So I'm going to talk a little bit about remote management and teleworking and what are some tips that we think are important. So let's go to the next one, please. You know, typically, I know that a lot of you are on board with teleworking right now because it's a business continuity. You know, there's a business continuity reason and a very important one. However, I really do want to say that there are other reasons for which people in the region have been teleworking and all over the country. By the way, you're not alone. In all the regions, we're seeing spikes in teleworking. The programs were implemented overnight, over a week. Some of the employees went to the office, grabbed their workstations, took them home, you know, and then they had to figure it all out. So hopefully I'll shed some light on this. However, I think it's really important for organizations to also weigh the other return on investment reasons for which teleworking can be implemented. And it's great if you can, you know, start steering your organization towards a direction that they are seeing productivity at being either the same or improved. You know, a lot of data. This has been the question around teleworking for 30 years. And that, you know, the truth is there is plenty of data that shows when people work at home, they get more done. And I'm sure you are seeing some of that even with the disruptions of COVID. But teleworking has been a great tool for recruitment retention, definitely up in your region where people are job hopping a lot. The reason I say your region is I'm out of California, but does it really matter now? It doesn't. And I'm based in Los Angeles, so I'm in a similar environment to all of you. Teleworking improves morale. Even today, people who are teleworking are telling us they do not miss the commute. And actually, I think a lot of organizations are starting to see that flexibility should be in their future. And maybe, you know, we don't need all this overhead. And obviously, there's ties to, you know, CO2 reduction and sustainability. You know, for a lot of employers, it means a decrease in tardiness and absenteeism. I know Seattle traffic, and I know how, you know, congested it can be. Let's go to the next one. Now, teleworking under COVID has taken another shape. And I'll tell you why I call this WFH, or extreme teleworking, because teleworking in a normal situation would have been about, you know, increasing focus and for you avoiding the disruptions of the office, being able to get your work done. But now people are teleworking under a situation where everybody in the household's under one roof, working, homeschooling, providing childcare. This is a lot, plus the stress of the pandemic. Let's go to the next slide. Now, what happened with COVID is that, and you know, my data all has a citation. This is from SHRM. They had a survey of 660 people in the country, and as you can see, people are not alone when they're teleworking. They have 55% have their significant other, 41%, of course, you could check multiple. So for many people, it's not only a significant other, but it's also children. And I'll tell you, those are a little hard to handle under the same space. But even when you look at people who are working by themselves, that's hard because they're isolated, and it can lead to depression because they don't, you know, they have to have work balance measures in place. Let's go to the next one. This was, again, the SHRM survey, and they tried to establish how often people were interrupted. It was, as you can see, the most popular answer was 0 to 5 times, but there are people with more than 10 interruptions. And we can see that from a perspective of adopting technology, we actually probably went 2 to 3 years into the future, because now we're all Zooming and, you know, doing Teams meetings, and people's education on these tools is really great because they know how to use them. And let's move on to the next one. So they asked people also, where are you housed? In your house, or where are you working in your house? We think that if you're doing teleworking properly, you should have dedicated space, but I'll get into that. Some people didn't. And as you can see, 52% said that they had a home office, 34% are using the dining table, which means that if they live with others, there's other people at the table too. And, you know, the couch and bed are not great places to telework. And I'll tell you why. I mean, ergonomically, they're not good positions to have as you're working in the day. Let's move on. So when people were asked what are they doing with the time they saved, this was based on a CNBC survey of multi-swing states and of swing states. And as you can see, at the beginning of the pandemic, and this was in April, people were saying they're spending more time with family, 47%, 44% relaxing, all the way down to 28% working more. Right now, I bet you if they repeated this survey, we'd probably see the working more numbers go higher. Okay, let's move on. So people are telling us that they have difficulty focusing. A lot of people are finding it difficult to concentrate. And what are the top distractions? Watching news. Watching news about the pandemic particularly can be very stressful. So if you're doing that, please know that you should shut off your news till you're done with work, because it's the same thing, but it's like the numbers get worse, the numbers get better, but it's very stressful. People are worrying about family and friends, the virus, and trying to work from home, with others present in the same space. Let's move on. Okay, so, obviously, not everybody thought that we would be shut down for this long. I think we all went home thinking it's going to be 2-3 weeks or months, and then we're going to be able to go back to the office. So in the beginning, when this question was asked in April, 55% of the people who were teleworking were saying they want to go back to the office, but 24% said that they wanted to work more from home or entirely from home. I think as time has gone on, more people are saying that they want to work remotely part of the week. And a lot of times where I'm seeing those numbers settle is 3 days at home, 2 days in the office, or 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. So I think people are getting used to this flexibility. And let's go to the next slide. Now, most of you, as I said, adopted teleworking just overnight. So you see what are some of the themes that have happened. The other thing that happened is that a lot of your organizations didn't adopt anything formal or even somewhat informal about, teleworking and guidelines and tips and all of that. I really hope that you are going to go back and get your employers to adopt a policy. A guideline is really shorter, a policy is longer, as to what the rules of engagement are. What these policies do is they enable you to have some rules and boundaries around teleworking to the degree that it's possible under COVID, and it's not completely possible. But, there are legal pitfalls if you don't follow. They're going to be there, and we just want to make sure you don't cross any lines as far as those legal pitfalls. That it's just legal issues that impact teleworking from a worker and employer perspective, and there's nothing that's a showstopper. And also to be transparent and to make sure that this solution works and continues. Now, the good news about WorkSmart is that we can provide you with templates, we can provide you with guidelines for policies, for all of the materials. We can do training. Let's move on to the next slide. For your organization so that you have a good program. So what are the legalities? Obviously, there's your FLSA rules regarding wage and hours. And so you want to make sure that for the non-exempts, you are not going over 40 hours per week unless overtime was allowed, and that you have some way to determine how long, when did the employees check in and when did they check out. So those are rules around the non-exempts. The exempt, it doesn't matter. With workers' comp, the reason that it's important to ask employees to have a dedicated workspace is that workers' comp applies when an employee is injured while doing work-related activities at home. And so to protect you as an employer from, having the kitchen in that and the bathrooms in that. Most employers ask the employees to identify dedicated workspace. Doesn't have to be a separate room, but also, pay attention to how they're laying out the cords and cables and make sure that they have a good chair. And I'll talk about some of those ergonomic things. So the rule is that if if there is an injury, then your workers' comp would apply in the dedicated workspace. And believe me, this has not been a showstopper. You can call your workers' comp carrier and ask them, what is the impact of our employees teleworking? They'll say no impact unless you start having a lot of work-related injuries. So it's good to give your employees training. OSHA does not require employers to do a home safety inspection. However, it is a double-edged sword because you've got to be aware of the workers' comp side. So I think it's advisable to give a little bit of ergonomic training, and we also have safety checklists that we can send out to the employees so they follow some guidelines. With ADA and FMLA, these two bodies of law do not talk about telework as an accommodation. However, the employer can choose to offer teleworking as an accommodation under both of these. But it's done on the ADA side and the FMLA side of the policy, and not in the telework. You also want to be careful of the language you're adopting for these documents. You don't want to say teleworking is a privilege or a perk, because that is it shows that you're creating haves and have-nots and may discriminate around who it's open to. And the other thing is you want to make sure that it's something that's available to the exempt and non-exempt to the degree that they're non-essential in these times. Have any of these been a showstopper? No. I mean, there have been large organizations like WashDOT, like Starbucks, and others in the Seattle landscape, which are allowing for teleworking. Let me tell you, the best example I can always give is that even the federal government had a huge telework program, and if the federal government could do it, then anybody can do it. And they basically use the same kind of language as I'm talking about, which is also in our templates. Let's move on to the next slides. What do these policies have? They typically have an indication of the goals of the program, and that's why it's good to say it's for business continuity, but I always encourage employers to have other goals, as I discussed at the beginning of this, such as to improve recruitment retention, or to improve productivity. I mean, let's face it, in this environment, we would have no productivity if teleworking would be not allowed. So it would be really, really difficult. You also want to have some criteria for selection to define what kinds of jobs are open to teleworking, what kind of employees is this a good fit for, what the arrangement is. Can they, you can even put a timeline in it and say this, program will be in effect from this time until, further discussion, and limit the time so that people understand it's something you're doing under COVID if necessary, but revisiting later. And there is language around workers' comp and the other legalities that I talked about that's important to have. And it's good to talk about what resources are available. Should companies be providing technology? Are you doing it? Are you not doing it? Are they relying upon, their own hardware, or using, your abilities to, to get into the network? So, and the distinction should be clear about where technology advice ends, so that, maybe, you don't want tech support to be providing, information on all the different kinds of computers that are out there, but they have some minimum standards. And so there's discussion of workspace, and we don't want non-telecommuters to, to basically have a bad time while this is going on. So you want to make sure there's communication. there are, I know Seattle doesn't fall into this, but there are parts of the country that have opened up a little bit. And even if there's going to be big meetings, there's zooming in people who are coming in for a few days a week with people who are at home because they can't afford to have everybody in the conference room anymore. So the technology is helping connect, you know, those who are in the workspace versus those who are not. Most places that I'm aware of are open just a fraction of their workspaces. Sometimes they're experimenting with 20%, 30%, but that's it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. For teleworking to be efficient, there has to be a big transition from managing presence to managing productivity. And I have to tell you, at the beginning of this pandemic, I just read a report from Microsoft. They did a study on their own teleworking program, and they showed that for managers, it was a little bit more difficult to get used to teleworking than it was for employees. So managers spent a little bit longer because they had to provide better direction to employees. Employees needed to be more deliverable oriented. So it did take a few hours more. It wasn't like, you know, it was like 5 hours a week, but that was at the beginning. Hopefully some of that is getting streamlined by now. So to have an environment where you manage productivity, you must be goal oriented. It really calls upon management 101 skills, which are try to delegate to the degree you can to employees you can delegate to. And, you know, if you're going to provide direction, it has to be, you know, a lot of direction for some employees. It's not bad to ask employees to develop milestones and deadlines on a weekly basis. And at the end of the week or the beginning of the next week, provide feedback on how they did. Obviously, video conferencing is an important part of this because managers do want to see their employees too and get an idea of, you know, do they look tired? Do they look sad? And because we have to draw upon other skills when people are teleworking at this level. 5 days is a lot for some people and not a lot for others. Okay, let's move on. SHRM did a survey on how productivity is measured when employees are teleworking. And I wanted to, you know, draw your attention more to the top, top topics that are here. And as you can see, employee responsiveness was really critical. So how quickly employees return emails, return phone calls, send in projects, line manager, supervisor establishing specific goals and parameters with the employee was important, which is part of managing by objectives. And there is no standard mechanism in place to measure productivity for telecommuters. You know why that is? Because we have to manage people who are in the office and at home really the same way. And if you think about it, why does anything matter if someone goes home? It really should not if you're working on deliverables. I want to also point out the bottom of this chart where you see that organizations monitor employees via software. And that is such a low response rate because that's not what a manager should be doing. You don't want to see when people are logged on and logged off. You actually want to track it through, how much work they're handling, how they're handling it, is it quality, is it quantity, was it on time? So if you don't have a way to measure productivity in the office, it's going to be hard at home too, but productivity should be tied to measurables. So let's move on. And the best way an employee can, this is kind of breaking down this process of telemanaging, is, maybe for the next week, and I should have corrected this to say for the next week, if you're not doing this, make sure that you have a discussion by paper, email, not paper, email, of course, with your employees about what are they going to do this week. Define objectives and establish timeframes. It's not bad if you get the employee engaged so that they can send you an email saying, here's what I'm going to work on this week. By beginning of next week or end of that week, just review what was done, coach employees if needed, And this is a process that's an ongoing process week by week. In fact, a lot of managers did this even when people were in the office. Very rarely did we just evaluate an employee's performance on, once a year. Because this is what the crux of management is about ongoing communication. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So in terms of, obviously there's impact on teamwork. I hope that you're all becoming better at this, but have clear direction in terms of when you want employees present, when do you want all hands on deck versus not, because people can't read your minds. Make sure that meetings have a lead with an agenda and clear topics. I can't tell you how valuable a 15-minute team huddle has become in this environment, where people just get a chance to, get on video, talk about what they're doing. And I was reading a really great article over the weekend about how sometimes a 15-minute meeting is really better than a 30-minute meeting, and sometimes a 45-minute meeting is better than a 60-minute. Especially when we do meetings like this, if we can maybe get them, and we should try to do that, get them under 45 minutes, it's 15 minutes you're giving someone back in their day. And that can be huge. So let's be very intentional about topics and, assess that, how can we meet less, because people are getting Zoom and webinar fatigue, and, gauge it a little bit more carefully. I don't think we're used to having interactive video running continuously for processing our thoughts. I think it drains people. Maybe this will happen in a few years, but it is certainly quite new, to getting used to get into all these meetings and be doing everything visually. Okay, let's, you also want to make sure people, are adequately trained on technology. Don't expect it to happen. If someone's having difficulty, give them time to do a tutorial for whatever software also you're using, because, there's so much software out there these days, not only for communication, but like for different fields that makes collaboration a lot easier. I can't tell you how many programs I saw that were out for architects, because architects and engineers always complain that they have a lot of collaboration, but I see them adopting teleworking in this environment because they have other collaborative tools. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So do consider having, short team meetings, like I mentioned. Please build trust. Trust is the most important component of teleworking. And, if you call everyone on the hour or, send them a message to see if they're working, that's not practical. Don't do that, in fact. And, don't keep sending your employees, texts every hour or 2 hours, because they need productive time too. But, trust that they're doing it. So, and let's move on to the next one. Have virtual breaks for people. Sometimes these breaks are for people just to talk with their coworkers. And it could be that they're sharing, recipes. It could be, for something social, meet my pet. But employees do need some other forms of engagement while they're working at home, so that they feel part of the culture and they feel connected. Make sure your employees have work-life balance. If someone's continuously working till the odd hours of the morning, catch it. And, tell them that you need them to unplug in order to be productive the next day. Unplugging has become very hard, and that's one of the causes of work from home fatigue. So let's move on to the next slide. These are some ideas for boosting morale and collaboration. As you can see, employees have figured all of these out, but it's not bad to do on a company basis. Keep up with the birthday celebrations. Don't do those water cooler get-togethers to brainstorm. In the office, things happen serendipitously because we were there. Why can't we be serendipitous in our electronic communications? We can. It's okay to interrupt people and say, hey, I've got an idea. Let's jump on a quick conversation. Have virtual town halls. have these gatherings. Some people are even doing karaoke hour, happy remote, happy hours and all of that. And, at least you don't have to catch a ride to get home. So you can drink as much as you want. Just kidding. Not encouraging you to do that, of course, but it's, it's just fun for employees to break their day like that. At the end, of course, not in the middle. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So for the teleworkers, please, you might have slipped on some of these, meaning you've let them go. Have a morning ritual, which says, here's when my day begins. Get dressed. Don't stay in your pajamas. Okay, we won't know, but change and, get into something comfortable, which is different than I'm going to go to bed now. Schedule the virtual breaks, or if not, make sure there is a break that the employees are taking, because you got to get up in the middle of your morning and the middle of your afternoon to move around, to change position. You could even go for a walk. Eat lunch away from your desk, so that you get a little opportunity to break the day. Meditate if you need to, unwind after work. Just, 10 minutes of mindfulness might be a good way for you just to, come back to a calm position, or get out of the work, hours, and stay away from news and radio. Make sure you have an end of the day ritual. That is really important. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I think I've covered some of this, but this really talks to the importance of a dedicated workspace. As you can see, Travis, Kirk, myself, we all have a dedicated workplace that we're working at. You're not seeing the kitchen behind us. And at least it looks like a place that provides privacy and concentration. Organize your work schedule to the degree possible that you can around what is your personal non-available time. So I think, let's go to the next slide. Before I get into, I'll go through ergonomics and then go back to that and tell you what I mean. It's important to have a desk. I know you think I'm crazy, but I get questions from people which ask me, is it okay to work at an ironing board? No, an ironing board is not stable. I know, but people they want to be creative. You have to have surface space. So, usually a 6 foot by 6 foot, workspace is good. An ergonomic chair is good. Don't work on glass, by the way, it can break. You shouldn't use a dining table. We are about 4 months into this pandemic. If you don't have a good chair by now, invest in one. Your back will thank you tremendously. Lighting should be directed towards the side or behind line of vision, and you don't want direct sunlight. If you're using a laptop, make sure that you're using a remote mouse and a remote keyboard, because that will give you, it will be a much more ergonomic space. And bring the laptop up by either special devices that are available through a lot of outfits, or just by books, so that you can see the screen at a higher level. As I'm pointing to my own laptop that you can't see, but that's exactly what I have done. And I work at home every day, even before the pandemic, except for when I traveled. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Safety, make sure your electrical support is there. You have surge protectors, you have interconnecting cables so that it's not set up in a way that anybody can trip. And it's always good to have heavy items on close to the walls, and have enough airspace around your work area. Now, noise is something that it's getting hard to avoid because the pandemic is going on, and some people do have children in their background. To the degree possible, try to schedule your work time around when is also the time that you have to take care of your kids, because sometimes household partners are switching responsibilities. So one person does it in the morning during 2 hours, and another does it 2 hours in the afternoon, so that you can, to the degree possible, avoid having distracting noises in the background. I know we weren't all prepared for this, so employees by and large are more relaxed than ever about the noise or childcare at home. And I know we can't send kids to camps and school and all of that. So we'll just have to live with some of this for now. Okay, let's move on. Please train your family and friends that you're at home, but you're teleworking. Decide, what interruptions are at home. To the degree possibly you want them to respect it too. So create a space around what is your work and what is your home and your responsibilities. Even a mental space may help, or the look on your face may help in doing that. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Communication is important. Talk with your managers. Make sure that your Outlook is updated. It's showing meetings. It's showing when you're not available. You may be flexing later, starting later in the day and working later, or you may be flexing and starting earlier and ending earlier. That might be a great use to your time, to use your time to do your work right now. But make sure your managers know that that's what you're doing. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Again, communications are very important. FaceTime. I think we all have seen the value of FaceTime, but not too much FaceTime. And we're at the time when we're all trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do this so that it's not intrusive. Okay, let's move on. Teleworkers don't get burned out. It can happen, Make sure you have work-life balance. Yes, if you have an office, you could go hide in there, but, it might not be a good idea either. So you want to have balance, and let's problem solve as, the problems arise, and don't wait for them to come to a head. Okay, let's move on. This is just a slide about maintaining health and wellness. As you can see, wellness is important, so keep your immune system strong, get fresh air, stay informed, limit media consumption. I've said it 3 times because it's really important that you do that. So anyways, we will be sharing these slides with you, or this recording with you as well. Let's keep moving on. And the future of work at home really does need planning now. I think management has come a long way from accepting that this can be part and parcel of the workplace. I think at first many managers and upper management were like, I don't think so. But now I think they really are starting to see the value, and they're starting to see the value of not commuting. So maybe having some form of teleworking for some days. Hopefully your technology is improved, and part-time telecommuting is also, teleworking is something that may happen in the future. If you have jobs that might be, it might be a situation where you have to have people share a job, and it could be that you've let people go, but you want to hire people back, and maybe you provide 2 half-time jobs for an individual, so they're also getting paid. By the way, let's not forget about people who've been furloughed or who've lost their jobs, and be creative in how we can recruit and bring them back to the workforce when possible. I know that we did everything quickly, so maybe if we go a little backwards, provide a little training, talk about some of the issues that I brought up today, it might be useful for your programs. I know this may sound crazy because America is not ready for it, but if possible, consider a 4-day work week to give employees more balance. A lot of Europeans have that. So, the 40 work week is not a 40-hour work week anymore. It's a shorter work week. So they're getting everything done in, 32 hours or something like that in 4 days, because employees are getting more productive, they are delivering more work. So maybe we could cut them some slack in the middle of this pandemic. And let's go to, I forgot to mention something else. Well, these are our services for WorkSmart. So we can, work with you on every step of program delivery. We can help overcome concerns. We can do focus groups with your people who are teleworking, separate from your people who are managing teleworking, to find out what the issues are. We can help you with your policies and evaluation criteria and your CTR goals, which I think are important to all of you. So that's WorkSmart. I wanted to say something else, and that is, please advise your employees to take time off or personal time off, because it's become necessary. Although we don't have anywhere to go, but a break may be necessary because we usually take breaks in July and August. So I'm going to stop talking at this point. I don't know if there are any questions, or let's have Tim talk probably, huh? I don't see anything, Travis.
Well, thanks for sharing, Elham. And just a reminder for everyone, if you do have any questions for our presenters, please type in the chat and we can address it from there. So thank you, Elham, for your presentation. So moving on, we're really excited. We have Tim Rowe next, who is the Transportation Program Manager for T-Mobile. Tim's going to talk for about 5 or 10 minutes on T-Mobile's transition to teleworking and all the bumps that come with it. So, Tim?
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Given that we have a rather short amount of time, I'll try to make sure this is short and sweet. T-Mobile has about 10,000 employees at 6 campuses in 3 counties locally that I help manage to get to and from work on a normal basis. We've been on mandatory work from home since March. There are some people going to the office now, but it's still a very small percentage of the total population. In a standard work week, we would normally allow daily bonuses of $2 per day per person who's teleworking. We use a Loom system to track that. The company is also socially conscious, so people are interested in doing telework to try and both get themselves off the road, which is self-interest, but also to reduce the total carbon footprint that the company's employees have on the planet. So they like to contribute to that. Virtual private networking has been available before and is currently still available to allow people who need to work remotely to have clean access to privileged data sources. Much of the sorts of kinds of things that you'd like to do, like email, don't require virtual private networking. So the company had a leg up when it came time to getting large numbers of people to work remotely. Bumps that come with working from, especially this large number of people working remotely, we don't have formal telework contracts that Elham suggested. We haven't really noticed, I haven't been informed of any problems that have resulted from the lack of those, but there are guidelines of various types to solve other issues. And one of the problems we've noticed is that home environments are not always conducive. Elham talked, I think, quite well about how not to use ironing boards for your desktop area and other sorts of problems. Some people don't have screens, some don't have quiet areas to work. In one case, there's a news article about how 12,000 call center employees needed to be relocated from a central server to their central site to their own home office in 48 hours in a different part of the country. So many T-Mobile employees have been allowed to take their office equipment home with them. Another problem that people have been dealing with is safety and ergonomics. Either they're working too long because they don't have a clear start and end to their day, so they continue to keep working, or they're sitting too long. They get to a point where they've just been working and working and working, and they don't realize, without the social cues of people around them, that they would need to stop, get up, stretch their legs. So T-Mobile has taken the step of creating a safety and ergonomic guideline list, including a checklist that employees have access to, they can go online and see. And these things make sure that they have a reminder about how they can best engage within their home work area without overdoing it. They also have a stretching guidance for people who are spending too much time in one location until they get cramps. And so they need to have a better approach to being in one location and not taking the time to move between offices or their meetings, for example. Since they're always moving from meetings by moving a mouse click, the stretching guidance helps with that. Connectedness is a challenge, as Elham had noted. We have trouble with keeping employees and managers connected to each other and helping them to know how to best integrate their normal workday virtually. So there are training available at multiple sites. There's also sites on, of course, our dog would choose now to start barking, pardon for that. Example of the working from home hazards. We have a working from home site, making the most of your new normal. Another one, making working remotely work for you. We have several Slack channels that serve to provide our internal teams access to employees to help them deal with conversations around connectivity challenges, integration challenges. The tools that we have available include things like Slack, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Skype for Business. And so one of the challenges can be, which one of those is the current team meeting going to be scheduled on, and who's doing the scheduling, and does everybody know how to schedule for all of those different varieties? When you add to that external sources that include partners that may be using Zoom and GoToMeetings and Uber conferencing and Google Meet and Amazon Chime, you get a certain degree of tool fatigue. And so it's important, and we have internal training to help people understand how to use those effectively. Other solutions that some of our partners have used is to have virtual lunchtime meetings where people take their lunch and join over a conference call and can share stories with each other. There's one I've been a part of that was literally story time. People proposed the stories they wanted to tell, sort of like a moth radio hour, and they get on that and tell each other things about their work life or personal life to break up the day. Another is a virtual happy hour, sometimes with a presenter that says interesting content. We had one that was about the Black Lives Matter movement and people's personal experiences with regard to that. So as topics come up, it's possible to have standardized systems that allow people to share that information. So those are the sorts of things that T-Mobile has run into, and some of the methods that they're using to overcome those challenges. Certainly, the longer we go on, I'm sure the company will come up with more ways to facilitate team interactions. And one of the challenges that we have working from home is that people feel less connected for innovation and doing the kinds of things that they would do in a conference room with a whiteboard, and the energy that comes from that. And there are tools that are available for some of those things, and those are being explored. Right now, there's no formal system for doing those that gets people to work together well and capture the same or better types of collaborations that would occur when people are face-to-face. So it is a challenge, but there are places that there are people that are working on those, and we'll look forward to integrating those into our solutions as time progresses. So that's the sort of stuff that we're doing at T-Mobile. The challenges that we've seen, as I say, we were lucky because we had access to existing telework experience. Some teams allow people who have been employed in them after 6 months to work from home 2 days a week anyway. So it wasn't a brand new idea for T-Mobile to do. Obviously, having the entire company do it added challenges. And those are things that we're going to keep working toward solutions for, but we're actually doing quite well. And having as many people as we could work from home in order to keep the country safe and each other safe has been something we're proud of being able to do. And with that, I will turn it back over to Travis.
All right. Thank you, Tim, for sharing T-Mobile's experience with the transition. Looks like we don't have any questions in the chat. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. Once again, please reach out if you have any questions. All of our contact information is in the chat. Again, the slides that you saw today will be shared with you after, as well as a recording of this webinar will be uploaded to the Choose Your Way Bellevue website. Again, hope you're able to learn something today, something you're able to bring back to your business to enhance your telework program and policy. So with that, I just want to thank everyone once again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Can I jump in 1 second?
Yeah, Kirk, what's going on?
Yeah, I just want to, following up on what we heard in this conversation, I want to note that businesses in Redmond can apply at goredmond.com/grants for Go Redmond grants to cover the cost of productivity software like Basecamp or Trello, or even Zoom conferencing services like, video conferencing services like Zoom. And those are grants that you can find at goredmond.com/grants to help cover those. And it's just a fantastic resource for Redmond businesses. So I want to flag that, and I'll put the URL in the chat.
Yeah,
All right.
and if I can just chime in for a second, Travis, we are sending out a survey for evaluating this webinar, and on that survey you can also tell us if you want us to contact your business about our services, and you can, either Travis, Kirk, or myself can get back to you about improving teleworking, at least at your organization.
That's perfect. Yes, I will include that in the email with the slides so people can give their feedback, which would be great. So
thank you.
With that being said, thank you, everybody.